The feedback flow goes both ways. So we've always, it's so easy to collapse marketing into just sort of selling more in the business. To me, marketing is also a learning channel. It's a way to learn, right? And it should feed back the other way.
Hi, I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of MMA Global, the international nonprofit trade association for CMOs who are focused on architecting a new future of marketing.
I'm Rex Briggs, an author, market researcher, measurement inventor, and entrepreneur.
Hi, I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of the Marketing Media Alliance.
I'm Rex Briggs, an author, marketing researcher, and entrepreneur, and this is Decoding AI for Marketing.
So Rex, listen, we know marketers care a lot about generating demand and making sure that the message, it's the old adage, right message, right time, that kind of thing. Because I hear a lot of people talk about, nobody really ever does, it feels like. Okay, I mean, that's kind of what it is.
It's aspirational.
Yeah. And we've heard about this notation of, people can go in and ask for information with chatbots, and we know I hate chatbots, at least chatbots by companies, let's be clear. Of course, the LLMs are pretty powerful, but we've not seen that sort of crack that experience. But I do believe that the AI age, and we've talked about this a lot in the show, that it's all about, AI's advantage is all about personalization.
Yeah, we hear that again and again, and a lot of the people that we're talking to that are at the leading edge, absolutely. Yeah, and I know that you hate chatbots, which are sort of a manifestation of an attempt to try to make things more personal. But I think what's interesting when I think about all the points of communication is you're totally right. The aspiration has always been right message to the right person at the right time, market to a segment of one. This has been true for the last 30 years. In fact, it really started with direct mail, and when email came along and the web came along, the idea was I thought we were going to get there, but very few people did that really well. And marketers really didn't do that very well at all. The people that did it were the media owners that could have an algorithm that could dynamically change your feed. I did that early work at Wired. They did a cover story about some of that work early on, and it was really hard because we had to get an editor who would write special content. Instead of just writing one story, he would have to write like 15 leads. But imagine if you could have agents do all that work. Yeah. Now you can sort of pull it off and scale it, and we're finally to where the technology is smart enough and good enough and capable enough to where that's viable, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that's why we're excited about the guest today, because it appears that his company, we'll let him sort of tell us what's going on there, has really figured out how to implement an AI layer that allows you to better personalize with customers. So Paul Meinshausen, who's the CEO and co-founder of a company called Aampe, it's spelled AAMPE for those who are listening in, provides agentic infrastructure to really accomplish that. So I'm super excited to hear how far they've gotten on that.
Yeah, welcome, Paul. Hey, maybe, Paul, start off and describe what your company does and how this is different from the earlier generations of machine learning in marketing. What makes this special, and why is this the moment?
It's awesome to be here, and excited to chat. So Aampe provides, as Greg said, what we call agentic infrastructure. What that means is it's a layer of infrastructure, a layer that provisions an agent, a learning agent for every single end customer or end user for a business that's deploying our infrastructure, that's using it. Marketers that are using it, other teams that are using it within the business. The agent then their job is to manage the interaction and communicate with the end user in a way that lets them begin to learn that user's preferences and help them find value, help them kind of go through the journey that's best for them to allow them to generate value. And then that leads to a sustained relationship over time.
Okay, and Paul, just to be clear, yep. The end user here, because I think that the terminology, I don't want to make sure it throws people. The end user is the consumer.
The consumer.
Or the B2B customer who's buying. It's whoever is making that likely potential buying decision, right? Just to be clear.
That's right. So think of a food delivery platform and everybody who downloads that app and begins to order through that app. Each one of us, as a person in the world eating and trying to decide what to eat, has an agent assigned to us by that business whose job is to work with us to learn what we have a preference for, what we're trying to achieve with the food we eat, and successfully find it and enjoy it. work over time.
If a food delivery has 10 million customers, I don't know what the number could be, but you actually come from Singapore, that would be easy to have 10 million customers there probably. So
Definitely.
So basically, you're developing 10 million agents.
That's right.
That understand that customer.
Yeah, that's right.
One agent per customer, and I think that's a little bit more. Let's unpack that a bit more. What that agent is doing. So the first one is that the app experience itself is oftentimes fixed, but there's places where you could dynamically change the content. You could change the headline. You could change the food that you're showing. You could change the call to action. Like if I'm looking to eat just solo for fuel because I've got this podcast, I got more work to do. That's going to be different than if I'm bringing in a meal for two and I want to have a romantic Friday night dinner with my wife. Talk a little bit about how the manifestations of what the experience is and what the agent's doing behind the scenes to decide how it should give experience 1 versus experience 2.
Yeah. So even though we're a couple decades into personal computing and digital infrastructure, I think that it's oftentimes useful to kind of step away from it and actually just return to the physical world and develop some intuitions there. And so let's take the context of, let's say, a Walmart. All right. So in the U.S., where I grew up in the 1990s, if you typically have a Walmart in your town, because of the reality of physics, right, you'd have one Walmart in the town, and Walmart would fill that with items that you might be interested in. And so I looked at the numbers one time, and in the 90s, a typical Walmart would have about 100,000 SKUs, like distinct items that you could purchase. So that's a lot of stuff, right? Who needs 100,000 things? And it's organized in the store. Now, any given person who walks into that Walmart really typically wants less than 1% of those things. But everybody wants a different 1%. Now, Walmart, as a human walking into that store, you then have to solve the problem of finding what that 1% is. Walmart wants to make that as easy as possible. So it uses a sort of taxonomy. It organizes the Walmart in a way that helps you localize what you're trying to find. So there's an electronics section and a menswear section, and you go to the section you want. Now, at the edge, you can always find these weird things that are sort of harder to locate, right? Like there might be the exercise device. Should that be in electronics or should it be in sportswear? Who knows? And so that creates some friction as you go into it. But the reality is you have to somehow find the generic best layout. And in the old days, scientists sort of in merchandise and in retail would be trying to figure out where to put everything based on the overlap in that 1%. So grocery stores would pull the milk to the back of the store because even though most people want it, you don't want it at the front because you want them to go in and have to pass by a bunch of other stuff. So just think about that, right? So now after that, over the early 2000s to 2010s, the world just grew very fast in terms of physical material well-being. We all of a sudden had a lot more things than we could ever want. The things in the world grew. And they grew because Walmart didn't have to put all of them in a store. So today, Walmart Online has something like 500 million SKUs. So think of the order of magnitude growth there. Walmart could never put 500 million SKUs in every town in America in a building. It wouldn't make sense. It'd be extremely expensive. It just doesn't work. So digital enabled that to happen because they could put all those SKUs behind a screen. All of a sudden, all of that extra material abundance we could access it. And in many ways, that's great because we can find the thing that's really super, super specifically suited for us. So great. So now we move into software and we know that we have the same problem. Digitally, we have to find the thing the same way we would find the thing physically. And you would think that you save a lot of time because you don't have to drive, you don't have to, but the time you save, if you just do the math, like how long it takes to drive to the store, how long it's to walk around, the increase in things is actually still means that the opportunity cost of even less time is expensive. So that's what leads to the cognitive fatigue when you're scrolling through stuff and you get tired after 5 minutes and you're like, I don't want to find the thing anymore. I'm tired of it. So what software just has to do is decide what should I show you in a screen when there's 500 million things to show you. And so there's taxonomy and there's other things. Now, software in the early days modeled a lot of things on the physical world. That's why we have the desktop computer and the Windows and all these words, files and folders that are really analogies of the physical world. But then that started to create a lag, because while we have to organize Walmart in one way because of physical reality, theoretically we don't have to organize Walmart online or a Walmart app in the same way for everybody. But because of the way we build software, we still had to make a choice because we had no way of knowing in that software what you would want versus what Rex would want versus what I would want. And that's because software is built on what is called, you can think of it as a rules engine. A human gives the instructions and says, this is what you do, this is how you lay it out. So that's where we are, and what we sort of now you can say, well, the human can have a search box and you can put it in and you can look for what you're looking for, and then it just becomes the problem. Well, yes, but we don't always know what we're looking for, and that's why browsing matters, and that's why sort of those things. So that's kind of like the pinnacle of where we reached, and we got to this situation where, yeah, it's painful to browse, and that's true in Netflix, it's true in Walmart, etc. So what AMP represents is the beginning of the ability to say our software can be designed differently, where instead of a rules engine that reflects a single team, a product or marketing team describing how we should interact with that person, we can begin to have software interact with people the way as humans we interact with people. And so how do we...
Hey, Paul,
yeah, go ahead.
that gets really complicated, though. I know the obvious question the listener's having right now. I mean, listen, AI is like with Tourette's. You know, we don't turn, people with Tourette's loose on our customers because we don't know what the hell they're going to say. So, I mean, how do you mitigate this thing from saying something stupid or, let alone just,
right.
Missing the point? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, yes.
That was a good example, I thought.
The technical question would be, Greg's asking about the guardrails, the policy. Yeah. How do you set
exactly?
Like,
I turned it into something else.
I like
go
the
ahead,
Paul.
Sorry.
Maybe they'll take off in textbooks coming to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've come a long way very fast in AI, and in fact, we have a long way to go still. And what an LLM represents in terms of knowledge and ability is really only just getting started. A language model, as smart as it appears to be, is not nearly as smart as you'd think.
Smarter tomorrow
as
than
you might
it was
expect.
today, every day.
And that's right. And so now the job to be done is starting to figure out, well, what does it mean to be smart? And how do we build processes? How do we build other factors, and what other parts of data and other things do we need in order to kind of make smartness? The simplest example I have that everyone should be able to resonate with is if smartness was what mattered, right? Then I should be able to take someone like Einstein and drop him into your company, and like all of a sudden you'd get a lot smarter. I think most people would know that if you dropped Einstein onto their team, in many ways it might actually be counterproductive. He'd probably get in the way, kind of argue about certain things. Like, it's not just smart. It's not just smarts. It's also process. That's one side of it. You have to have processes. Any company that's hiring people puts processes in place, puts governance in place. They don't just hire 500 people and go sell my business. You have to give them instructions. You have to give them guidelines. You have to think strategically about what you're trying to do. That's part of the problem. Part of the problem is also technical, in the sense that a language model has a lot of difficulty maintaining a context for an end user. It has a difficulty navigating layers of meaning and things like that. I think the simplest example that everyone should resonate with, maybe, I'm in San Francisco, and right now in the streets, most people are pretty familiar with the concept of autonomous driving, and cars are driving all over the place. You don't have autonomous driving by dropping an LLM into the car. That's not how it works. It's not like, oh, it's general knowledge, they can figure it out. No, in order to do that, you had to develop certain kinds of hardware, like the LiDAR. You had to be able to have responsiveness in a fast way. But also, you had to have forms of learning that would allow it to not make sort of expensive experiments where it's like, well, let me just try cutting across this yard, right? Don't try that. Follow the rules, and here's how you implement the rules.
The guardrails, right?
That's right, the guardrails. So the guardrails are not just... Yeah, so exactly. So the point here is just that you need, for businesses to be able to use this to communicate with their customers and to manage their interaction, we actually need a different kind of learning infrastructure. An LLM, you can't just take something like a ChatGPT or a Claude and deploy one Claude, instance for every single end user. That won't work. You have to develop specific, vertical specific sort of processes and cognitive capabilities that, again, are not embedded within a language model.
So that's probably your agentic harness that has the rules about the brand guidelines and what's acceptable.
Yeah, not just a harness,
skews,
because if it was a harness, it would be like controlling the language model. And in fact, what we're trying to do is build cognitive capability to listen to users that even a language model doesn't have.
Okay, so maybe a scaffolding that has a pipeline of new data coming in, new signal, so that it's adjusting. Talk a little bit about, coming back to the food example before.
Yep.
What you described before as a problem is that we had a explosion of the amount of SKUs that were available to people because the internet made that possible, and we needed some way of editing or focusing what the interest is. And you express the frustration that people have where they still can't find stuff. It's the old saying, 500 channels and nothing on. You go to Netflix, you've got all this choice,
right.
but you get lost in scrolling and you never get to what you want to do. How are you solving that, and how is the agent part making that part? How does that work better? And it sounds like what you're saying is that marketers need to rethink not just the agent which comes downstream, but they have to go upstream and think about how is your data and information coming in, and how are you creating feedback loops and systems for learning so that these agents actually get the right signal to learn over time.
In fact,
do you want to unpack that for us?
The agents have to generate the right signal. Let's use another really concrete example. Let me do this. Let's use the concept of a movie for a second, then we'll come back to food. Have either of you, do you guys watch movies, watch TV shows, enjoy?
Sure.
Yeah. What's a movie one of you has seen in the last week or two that you enjoyed?
Well, I'm rewatching Ted Lasso with my wife, which I enjoy.
Okay, great. So let's pretend Greg and I don't know anything about Ted Lasso. Why do you enjoy Ted Lasso? Tell us about it just for a minute.
It has a good balance of warmth and tension. It's humor, and it at the end of it, we feel better most times after we spend 45 minutes with Ted Lasso.
Nice. So you're emphasizing those elements of warmth, the particular approach to life that he takes, the way he interacts with the people around him, right? That's lovely, and that speaks to what you care about. Somebody else could have emphasized that it takes place in Britain, and it's kind of like a cool setting where, you're in this small Richmond outside of London. Somebody else could be talking about the fact that it's soccer, and they just really love that context, and they watch shows about that. Somebody else could be emphasizing the comedy and comedic elements of it. So by describing that movie to us, what you've done is you selectively filtered out all the attributes of that film to the ones that you care about. So now what I'm going to infer from that is that you care about those. So if I was going to cross-reference another film to you, I wouldn't focus on one that has similar cinematography. I might not even mention the same actors, because maybe you don't even care about the actors. You care about the warmth of the plot and the positivism of the frame. So you see what we've done there. Now,
Yeah.
If a streaming app wants to do the way I would learn about you to try and figure out what to recommend to you, then what they need to do is communicate different films to you in ways that let them see you respond positively or negatively to that description.
Yeah, and you're right that the old approach in machine learning is thumbs up, thumbs down, which is not contextually rich enough compared to what you could do if you had an agent having a quick conversation about why am I interested in that. And sometimes I don't like Ted Lasso because I'm not watching with my wife. I'm looking for action and adventure to take my mind off of a really tough work week, and somehow watching some type of war or action movie does that. So you're right, that contextual part is super interesting, and most of our data gathering is set up for ones and zeros, not the rich context that you could infer more information from.
Well, hopefully we want to be able to capture the rich context in more ones and zeros. And so we can potentially do that, but we have to change the way we present information. So if I show you a sheet that has like 50 things on it, your eyes will rapidly scan to the thing that you care about, and you will select for that, right? And then I will see you will select on that sheet. Maybe it'll be out of 2 different sheets. So like 2 different movies with a whole lot of characteristics. If I put those to you in that way, like as a statistician, it becomes very difficult for me to implicitly learn which of the things on that sheet, which of the characteristics you picked out.
Yeah, I mean, you are describing a little bit of a statistician's conjoint, right?
That's right. That's right. So if I compress that list, and frankly, most of the things on the list you don't care about at all. Like they're irrelevant. They're orthogonal to your interests, perpendicular to your interests. You don't care about that aspect. If I compress the space to just a few things and you respond positively, then I'm much more confident that it was those things that mattered for you. And if I have the alternatives, if I have like the versions that talk about the other things and I put them in front of you, then if I see you non-respond or respond negatively, then I can pick that up and learn it. So what we do as humans is we run these experiments. We try things and they either don't work or they work. We want our software to be able to do that similarly and to actually be able to actively make a choice about what information to present to you, receive, respond, and then update itself.
Hey, Paul, I think everybody's going to get the theory of that kind of stuff. I think you need to make this a little bit more practical for the rest. So maybe go back to, if you want, food delivery. Like what food delivery decisions is it making,
think about it. So normally, if, let's say it's coming up on lunch, and I'm going to send you a push notification. And so maybe I'll use some recommender system or use some decision to kind of decide to send a push notification about a particular item of food, like a burger, right? And I'm going to send a push notification about a burger to Greg. That's how it would work today. Now, in this world, we have an agent assigned to this. Then the agent is going to say, all right, well, one aspect of this that is I expect you might be interested in a burger. But now, in my push notification, I'm going to think about why you care about that burger. Like, as a human, you're eating for a reason. You're not just eating to eat a burger. Now, let's think about a couple of just possible, plausible reasons you might care about it. It may be that, like me, we're getting older, we want to maintain muscle mass, and we're trying to lift weights, and we're trying to eat high-protein diets. And a burger is beef and it has high protein. Or maybe we care about the environment and we want something that's sustainably sourced and grass-fed. And yes, I want a burger, but of all the burgers I'm going to eat...
But Paul, this still sounds like it's Paul making the decision.
No. So just think, the agent is going to have that possible set of reasons, and it's going to embed the notification. It's going to create a notification that emphasizes its high protein, and another is going to also generate a message that talks about sustainable grass-fed beef. Okay,
but
and now it's going to experiment.
Why isn't that just rules based though? I mean,
because
it's hey,
because it's experimental. So today I'll send that notification, and I'll observe. The agent will observe you specifically responding positively or negatively. Mm-hmm. By the way, I'll compare you against other similar users. That's part of the job statistically. Tomorrow, when I send you a notification, next week when I send you a notification, I'm going to incorporate your feedback into my representation of you, my model for you as a person. And every single time I do that, it's the agent updating its own reference for you, Greg.
It's making a prediction of what you think. Yeah, it's creating a set of possibilities. It's pushing one of them. It has a prediction of how you'd respond, and it sees whether or not Greg does what you're expecting, and then it's updating its priors, basically.
Exactly. And right now what happens is, whatever the system is, it generated one burger notification for everybody who wants a burger. And if it sends the notification to you, Greg, and it sends it to me, it'll be exactly the same notification. So one, it does that. So because it doesn't create the variation, it cannot learn. It can't learn. Like as humans, if you don't try things, you don't learn from things. Machine learning tries to learn from the past, but it quickly overfits because it only learns on what has ever been tried. And if what has ever been tried has always been determined by a rule with no variation, it literally cannot learn. And
so it's creating clustering of people that you think are similar enough that you can learn from a cohort on that dimension. And then through the experimentation, it's getting the feedback loop. I mean, it sounds like, this personalization is a key part. And I think Greg's vision has been that you would have dynamic messaging coming to people that the AI is producing. And this sounds like that gets us there, at least in some media like email or the push notification, maybe the website as well, if you have a set of assets that you can choose from.
That's right.
What are your most successful use cases so far of people that have done this, and what do you attribute their success as an organization compared to some other company that maybe tried this but didn't catch fire and become the core way that they were doing things?
Yes. So
the adoption question, I guess, is what we're getting to.
We published a paper at a technical conference called ACM Recommender Systems this past fall with this food delivery super app in Southeast Asia, where we using some of their numbers as well, we showed that the agents were driving like a 10 to 40% increase in GMV, gross merchandise value, for the users they managed versus the users that were just statically responding. That's a really cool example. We just published we just had a paper at the European Journal for information retrieval in Europe with this tax provider that we work with, a company called TaxFix in Germany. It's sort of the TurboTax for Europe, really successful, helping a lot of people managing a very complex part of their life, showing early tax submission, showing increased tax submission, showing less unsubscribed, so less people saying stop communicating with me. All really incredibly positively across the board for users who are managed by agents. A lot more examples like that.
So the key question, I love the results. The key question then that I was getting to is, what do you think makes a difference between the food super app organizationally and why they adopted it and got good success at it versus companies that maybe dabbled with it, tried it, or maybe even didn't adopt it all? Because I think that's a big question.
One issue is just that we've just come to market in the U.S., so and we just kind of came out of infrastructure, so we don't really have a lot of examples of companies that haven't been successful with it. Where I've seen them be a little bit slow, I think probably a big problem for us, and for the world right now is just awareness. There's so much happening in AI. A lot of CMOs don't realize how much that they can do with their own channels, and so our job is to just make them aware of how effective this technology is. But the second issue is, if you think about challenges, like once you know of it and what you're going to think about, one problem is exactly the one that Greg just identified or asked about, is that oftentimes businesses that are statically producing text, they're statically producing messages or emails. They think that it's just an algorithm solving the problem, that somehow you can just looking at existing. As a data scientist, one of the biggest myths I've seen, non-technical, non-data scientists, they think the answers are in data. The answers are rarely in data. The answers are in the experimental mechanism that generates the data. Data science is very much about the science, not just about the data. Scientists generate data by doing different things. They try this, they try that. They try this, they try that. You don't look at a person in their data and think, oh, I know all the answers to you. No, most of the time, that data is a very passing, very shallow representation of you as a person. If all I've known ever is that you've ordered burgers, I can't know what really matters, which is you like high protein food, or you like sustainable food, or you like delicious food, that you pay attention to trends versus you really just want to eat your favorites. Those are the things that matter. And right now, consumer technology companies, we've primarily generated data that just references what you've purchased, not why. And the only way historically to solve that problem has been like a very manual, like awkward process of putting a survey in front of you.
Yeah, and it is been very one way. And what you're describing is marketers need to rethink about having a two-way interaction, and in that two-way interaction, designing it to improve marketing and think about measurement to improve rather than to prove. Yeah. And that's a big shift. I do think you're going to run into a couple barriers, which is I'm finding that matrix organizations have a very hard time adopting the technology because there isn't a clear ownership of the relationship with the customer and a clear accountability for increasing the value. And you'll find more success when you do find companies that are probably smaller teams, less fragmented, with clear ownership to the customer value, the revenue, the profitability, the enterprise value. But you're starting off in a really important area.
Some of our businesses are actually quite massive, and I would actually say this is sort of the unlooked for reality, is that so many leaders, so many executives will have exactly the problem that you've identified, because it's always been true, which is my teams aren't coordinating. My teams don't have shared understanding of whose responsibility is what. My teams are working, or different teams are working at cross purposes. That's true. Like, that's one of the always been the determinants of success is, are you a cohesive organization that you have, right? But actually, I would say we've always attributed that to just like human, like, are you good humans? Do you have skills? Are you open-minded? Are you working together? I know that world pretty well. I did a lot of research in implicit psychology and cognitive science in that space. But I would actually say is that one of the coolest things is that I would argue that a lot of that historical problem of coordination within an organization is, again, an artifact of the software we've used. Because the software we've used is meant to take our individual instructions. And the primary problem is coordinating between two different teams' instructions. And humans, to both give instructions and coordinate those instructions, it's usually just too much and it's too slow.
I think you're giving marketers too much credit there that they're involved, but that's part
But
of
there might be something to it. What is it? Buckminster Fuller said, you can't change the way people think, but you can give them tools, the use of which will change their thinking. And you're kind of reversing that, saying that the tools that we've used have constrained us to operate and behave in certain ways, and we need to blow that up. And that was really very much the shift that happened when we went from water wheels and steam power to electrification. The ones that won were the ones who changed the whole layout of the factory and began to work differently. So I think you're probably onto something, but Greg is also onto something too, which is sometimes it's good old human resistance.
Paul, listen, we've had a bunch of conversations at the global board, some of the world's biggest CMOs, and the main conversation is basically them rubbing their foreheads and saying, why does my team not understand the importance of personalization and the value that exists? And part of the reason, and somebody called it out, that was good, one of the CMOs said, she goes, we spend so much time telling people it's a singular insight and a singular message. I mean, that is an underlying thesis of marketing, which if you take a step back, is idiotic. It has to be, although you are trying to maintain brand, which kind of gets, listen, we can go in a couple of different directions, but the one I want to go, so back to the core point, why they wouldn't implement something like this, and not that they shouldn't, I think they should, but it's like, I don't know if we've talked about how there's the messaging being created and then delivered, because, the challenge if we're using generative AI goes off in crazy directions. So how are we preventing that? How are we keeping it from saying something
I
dumb?
think you're responding to where an LLM is, and actually that's a trivial solution. Like, I know that's going to feel hard to deal with, but actually I would say that's not the problem. But what you did you just pointed to something which is, let me pause on the answer to the making sure it doesn't say something dumb, and point to the deeper issue which you just identified. I remember when I first started to learn about this and really come to grips with it. It was several years ago, and I was talking to a senior marketer at a large retail app in Australia. And I would, as a consumer person, I previously built a consumer business in India around financial technology and helping people lending. We grew that to one of the largest in that market. It was very successful, and it was really cool. And as a cognitive science, I've always thought about people, not about marketing, about people at the end of the day, us as humans and how we make decisions, right? And so I was talking to her, and we were talking about the technology, and it was still early, but it was kind of coming out. And she at one point said, Paul, wait a second. Everything you're saying presumes that my stakeholder as a marketing leader is my end customer, and that's who I should respond to. I should personalize, I should respond to them, I should kind of try and understand them and everything else. And she said, wait a second, that's fine, but none of my end customers come into my office and yell at me. You know who comes into my office and yells at me? The VP of vertical, like the vertical business head.
Yeah.
Right. And so she gave me this example. This is the late stage of the pandemic. During the pandemic, this business had been very successful selling athleisure, yoga wear, things like that, because people weren't going out. They were getting healthy. They were doing yoga at home. Makes sense, right? But now this is the end of the pandemic, and people are starting to go out. They're starting to go back to work. They're starting to go to the club. And so while they're successful selling that athleisure, the vertical head for athleisure had gone out and bought and procured a whole lot of new stock, new SKUs around that sector. Right? So now the year is shifting. They bought it because they had to do it in advance, and now they're going forward. And so what they start to see is their consumers start to think more in terms of clothing for going out. And that's what starts to pick up, and people are not responding to athleisure stuff. So the sales start to go down. So that vertical head comes and says, you got to push this stuff. We've bought it. It's on our books. It's in our warehouses. We've got to sell it. Send more messages about athleisure. And she's like, well, I got to send this out because I'm being told to send it out. But I see my numbers. I see my users are no longer responding. That's a hard problem to solve for, right? Because now it's like your users want something different than you bought, but you got to sort of respond to somebody who really wants you to sell that thing. Now, I think that there's ways to resolve that in far better ways, and to realize, okay, well, wait a second. What we want the agent to know, right, is potentially that the expected value of selling one thing is higher than the expected value of selling something else. So in some ways, it is sometimes a compromise where if I'm trying to learn a person, right, if I can potentially get them to buy another piece of yoga wear, it's worth this much to me, right? And if I get them to buy, something else, it's worth a lot less. Even if the probability is a little lower of them buying it, it's still expected value better for me to push that thing. So it becomes a math question because you have to negotiate. You have to kind of resolve that. And that's what you want that's what agents can actually help us do more clearly.
Well, Paul,
but it is the core problem.
There is a very good point in that there. So, yeah, we can get into supply chain optimization and sort of the management of the back end. Okay. But I think you do kind of raise into the issue. Are you optimizing to serve the right message to the consumer, or are you serving part of the company's aims?
That's in the expected value equation.
It's the negotiation.
There's a part of me
right?
that makes me then listen. I love personalization, but there's a part of me that questions that that's the right way to go at this, because listen, there's a lot of clothing's a little funky because it tends to have certain meanings. But if you take the best example, Rex and I had a personalization project we did around EVs, around electric vehicles. And it was interesting. There's a lot of different reasons people buy an electric vehicle. They might buy it because sometimes they seem cheaper. They don't have to go to a gas station that goes really fast. They like. There's a lot of different reasons. So you can target different messages that is pushing the company's agenda because they got to move cars off the lot, but then don't necessarily meet the needs of the consumer. How do you merge and match that together in some regards?
Yeah. Well, so. The company's agenda, ultimately, I very much always start from the perspective of we as humans have to figure out how to thrive in the world. We have to thrive with technology that none of us had growing up, and it's changing faster than ever. And I have a 3- and 6-year-old, and I'm wondering how their life is going to be. We all are wondering this, right? So when we started this company, it was to make humans, as consumers, as people wanting things to solve our problems in life, help us better navigate that. Now, businesses want to serve us as humans. They want to give us value. And yes, you could sort of say they have their own agenda, but in a free market, in a free society, ultimately, they should only be able to serve our interests if they're somehow serving our interests. Like they only serve their interests if they're serving our interests. So my belief is that if you can figure out what a person cares about and you can speak to that, that is better for that person because they're able to then tune out the noise and kind of orient towards what they want. But there is a point at which, you can only go so far. But I think, again, if the business is long-term oriented and understands long-term value of their customer, that berating their customer or kind of missing the picture or not personalizing is actually going to lead to a lot of negative response, unsubscribe rates, tuning out, tuning off, and antipathy to a brand. So
but I think what you said
that's already happened, Paul. By the way, but go ahead.
Of course, yeah.
It had from the old broadcast model for sure. But I think what you're also showing is that the use of enterprise value, which creates an optimization between what the consumer wants and the expected value for the business, what that's more likely to lead to the AI getting better at persuasion. Which types of messages are more likely to change someone's mind, which is, they were kind of leaning away from athleisure, but now they see a celebrity in it, or now they see it in another context, and now they buy one more incremental, pair of soft sweats. But it's right? Isn't that what we're
and the feedback flow goes both ways. So we've always it's so easy to collapse marketing into just sort of selling more in the business. To me, marketing is also a learning channel. It's a way to learn, right? And it should feed back the other way.
Back to Greg's point about supply chain, should be hearing from what they're learning from marketing.
It should be because they should be learning faster. If the reality is nobody wants that stuff, don't bury your head in the sand and continue to push it, learn faster. So what I want is that marketer to be able to turn back around with data and be able to tell that person, here's the rate of decline. Here's the reason it's going down. And you should know that and factor it in. And yes, we'll do our best to sell what we have, but you should also know this and learn back the other direction. And then it becomes a question of, well, yes, what does effective persuasion mean? Look, it's not a binary. It's not 0 or 1, I'm interested in athleisure or not. You can change the perception. Many people are out there in the world wearing athleisure in professional context. The world has changed. We don't all wear like suits and ties like like we did in the old days. And so you can present that. You can sort of say, why buy that one thing that's good for whatever, where you can buy this really nice sort of high quality thing that you can wear both into the office and when you're, so you can present the actual thing in a way that allows the person to connect to, wait, why am I buying clothes in the first place? I'm buying them for me, not to like please this other person. So
who's coming up with those
other words,
options?
that's the
Paul,
job
who's coming
to
up
be
with
done.
those options? Who's coming up with those options,
Yes,
though?
yes.
Is your system coming up with those options? Yeah.
So strategically, that should be the marketing leaders. They should be
So
shifting
they would step
away
and
from
say, hey,
tactical management.
here's 20 more reasons why somebody
Yes,
might buy.
exactly.
Like, hey,
That's
match
it.
this with boots and it becomes this. Or try this color combination. Or,
Being so
we're
much more
pushing that this is a
creative.
trend. Yeah. So they
That's
come up
right.
creative. They feed that into your machine, and then your machine makes the decision. on
And
what
they
to
may
do
be
with the best
using
option for
disparate
that
parts
person.
of AI. If they start to kind of use language model type generative AI in order to kind of facilitate their creative ideas, then that's great. And then that can feed into agentic learners whose job is to actually communicate it. And so you begin to have this division of labor in AI the same way you do in the human world. And that becomes very powerful. But what's really important is you cannot push all of it. A lot of times there's these things in language models and in large statistics called embeddings, which is sort of like if we just draw a reference, if we just like learn a lot of things that we don't understand about a particular stimulus, maybe an image, maybe a piece of text. What we do with AMP, we provide what's called a semantic layer because you have to maintain human knowledge of a higher level of meaning. If you push it into just these edge weights, then you've lost the things, the dimensions of the world that matter. And so that becomes the strategic job of those marketers is to manage the dimensions that matter, not just all the. So think about it like if I'm walking down a hallway, cognitively, optically, I can sort of see that the color of the carpet and see the color of the wall, and I can see the art and everything else. Optically, my brain is actually filtering out most of that. I don't see most of that, but what I will see is the exit sign, and I will see the coffee machine. Those I actually look at and see because I pay attention to them. And so similarly for a business, you're kind of like not everything matters the same way. So you want to be focusing on what are those, for an EV maker, what are those core reasons people care about electric vehicles? What are maybe like the adjacent problems to solve for there? How do you create the intersection of environmental friendliness and safety? Because maybe I care about environmental friendliness, but I have young children, I really want to be safe. Or I care about it, but I'm worried about how long my battery will last and whether I'll be stuck somewhere without energy.
Yeah.
We're
So I think
complex, right? So that's what we want to manage.
And coming to the tail end of our podcast together to maybe put some capstones on this, one takeaway that I have in talking with you is how important it is for marketers to rethink their process. I feel like the point you made and what I've certainly observed is that a lot of marketing comes to measurement after they've already decided what campaign they're doing, after they've decided what channels they're going to use and so forth. And it oftentimes is measurement to prove rather than improve. And your key point about thinking about the interactions that we have in our communication is a key way that we can learn. And then that learning, that feedback loop, that's what feeds the flywheel. And that basically means that marketers need to start at the beginning to say, how do we construct a marketing communication so that it is working with agents and it can learn, grow, and improve over time? Would you add to that capstone? And Greg, I'd love to hear your capstone from today's session.
I would just pull out one line there because I think it's beautiful. I've not heard it, but it's amazing. Learning to prove versus learning to improve. And that is the shift. And that's why I resist optimization. We call it agentic learners because the first job to be done is learning, not optimizing.
I don't know, Rex.
Yeah.
This
So
is, this is a very tricky situation to figure out. I think there's a lot of complexity to this. So how do you get, Paul? How do you get people started? I mean, here we're coming to the end, but if you were to give advice to marketers, like how do they get started? How do they? I mean, we'll make sure that people can contact you and so on. But
yeah. So it's you first you just come to amp.com and check out our site. Reach out and speak to us. We've designed the agents to be able to operate, very much on top of the infrastructure you already have. So a lot of our customers are using tools like Braze or Iterable or Salesforce Marketing Cloud, to communicate with their customers. You can deploy it right against those and use those tools. You don't have to kind of rip and replace. And we always believe that the world has a lot of infrastructure that we can build on. We don't need to kind of start from scratch. And then it's just a process of challenging yourself a little bit and getting started. I think the initial apparent complexity is a lot more than the actual operational complexity to do it. And so sometimes you have that initial response of like, whoa, this is and then if you just slow down and then you say, wait a second, how do I get started here? What does this look like? And we see people, we see companies from very small, fast growing mobile apps to very big tech companies, et cetera, deploying anywhere from a week in to 4, 6, 7 weeks in. It's like, and then you sort of see it work in practice, and then you sort of see how it works. And I think, it's pretty rapidly changing, and that's exciting. And then the question is like, how do you going to navigate the organizational change that comes with that, and then what are the implications in terms of leadership boundaries and those things. But I will tell you, I think that's an unforeseen aspect of these technical changes. So many of our organizations and roles and jobs to be done were just defined in the last 10, 15, 20 years anyway, because we didn't have, think about digital marketing. It's a massive industry. It's a massive job. It didn't exist when I was born. Nobody was a digital marketer. And so let's not get too comfortable. Like all of a sudden what we've learned over the last 10 years is like now such true knowledge and inherently true. And no, we're still headed into more change. And what it means to do good work is not what it meant to do good work 10 years ago. And we can either be optimistic about that, or we can be scared about that. I tend to prefer to be optimistic.
Yeah, Rex, I think he just said if you stand still, you're going to get run over. I think is what Paul just said.
He took the more optimistic
more
version.
More gently.
Or you can take the Greg
I'm a summarizer. Yeah, exactly.
I like it.
Hey, Paul, we can't thank you enough for doing this. Really appreciate it. I mean, listen, you came on a horizon about, as you can tell, Rex and I love the concept of personalization. We put a lot of time into it here at the MMA. We've done a ton of experiments around advertising personalization. I think that you're taking it in a different direction. There's a different layer to this. So I'd be really curious to hear more. We'll probably want to have you come back at some point, especially if you have some marketer case studies at some point that you can really walk us through.
Would love to do that.
Well said. Well, thank you again, Paul, for being here. And that's it for this episode of Decoding AI for Marketing. I'm Rex Briggs.
And I'm Greg Stewart.
Be sure to catch all our episodes, plus subscribe, follow, rate, and review in your favorite podcast app so that those algorithms know how to recommend it to other people. Or you can also check us out on YouTube. You can get the transcripts and more information on our website, decodingaiformarketing.com.
And if you want to learn more about Marketing Media Alliance and some of the work that we're doing around personalization to help facilitate, because as our guest just said, this is a very difficult, challenging area. I don't think marketers are ready, but we got to get started because it is the inevitable future. But show up to MMAglobal.com and tell you more, or reach out to me. Thanks for listening, everybody.